Hi, this is Phyllis. Today's project is going to be my fringe bracelet. Fringe bracelet to match my fringe earrings. The video is going to be the making of the bracelet, and I'll show you a little bit at the end of the video with regards to making the earrings. But it's about the bracelet for the video, because I've not seen any bracelets that really match fringe earrings, and I really love them, especially these ones with the chevron. So I think I'm going to entitle this the Chevron Fringe Bracelet, and just to match these fringe earrings. And I hope you watch the video. I hope you get some materials, and I hope you make the project and let me know. I'm going to get to my materials list so we can get started. The materials for today's project are my green label semi-precious beads that I got from Michaels. These are hematite 2x4 millimeter multicolor stone. I'm using size 11 seed beads for this project as well. These are the Miyuki brand. This is metallic rainbow bronze. This is opaque luster gunmetal, and this is silver lined light gold. I'm using a size 10 beading needle. I possibly may use 2 jump rings. These are 8 millimeter. My Lobster Clasp is a 14 millimeter, and I'm using 2 wire guardians, and these are all the antique gold color. I'll be using my nippers, of course. I'm using my flat nose pliers to flatten down the end of my cord, my beading thread that I'll be using today, which I'm going to tell you about in a second. And I possibly may use my chain nose pliers here if I decide to use the second jump ring. But today's beading thread of choice is NanoFil. I'm using NanoFil because it is sturdy and dainty. Because I'm doing a fringy project, I need something that's not as hard as wildfire, and but with the same consistency of wildfire, but daintier. And that's what I find with this NanoFil fishing line. And I got this is a 150 yard strand roll that I got from Amazon. It wasn't that expensive. This is the clear mist color. And of course I'm using my bead board. This is the bead board that I purchased from Potomac Bead Company, and I love it. And you can use a bead mat if you don't have a bead board that you are comfortable with. All right, so let's get all these things together and we will get started. I need to add some additional items to this materials list before we get started. I'm going to be using a few straight pins to pin down my components for measurement, and I'm also going to be using my tape measure here for our sizing. Now we can get started. I've threaded my needle with just a little more than a yard of my NanoFil, and we're going to begin the project by using the stone spacer components. I'm sorry, the spacer beads, but we are going to make 2 components. We are making the brick stitch component that we did with the earrings. The only difference with the components on these earrings is that I used my 6-pound fire line in the smoke color, and I really don't like it because I can see the darkness. If I had more light, you may be able to see it there, but I can see the darkness, and I'm not too happy that I used that, but nevertheless, I learned from that mistake. So we're going to begin. I'm going to string on two of my stone beads, and I'm going to pull my thread down. I'm going to leave maybe about, I don't know, just maybe 4 or 5 inches of my thread, just to have something to hold on to and to weave back into when I have completed the project. So, and I'm going to pass my needle back through the first bead that I strung on, and pull my thread, and these beads will set up. They'll sit side by side, and I'm just gonna pull them down a little further just so I don't have that much tail hanging out. I just want something to hold on to, and enough so I can weave back. Now, in order to position ourselves for the I'm sorry about that. In order to get into position to add the next stone bead, I have to bring my thread, pass my needle down through that second stone bead that I strung. Now we're going to string on the next stone, and my working thread is coming down this way. I need to pass my needle this way with the new stone strung on, pull down, and it's set, but you have to place your needle in the position for adding the next bead by passing the needle back up this way. This is called a ladder stitch that we're making. We're stepping up side by side, step by step. Now we're going to move on. With our thread in position, I'm going to string on the next stone bead. My thread is exiting this way, and in order for me to add the next stone bead, I need to come around the bottom and pass my needle up through that bead. And to get into position to add the next one, pass my needle back down through this way. And we're going to continue in this manner until we have 11 of our stone beads added. So I'm going to pause myself and let you catch up with me, and when I get my 11, we'll be back to complete this component. I completed my ladder stitch. I have 11 stitches in my ladder stitch. You do not have to do 11. You could do any number. You can make it wider, you can make it narrower, as long as you use an odd number for your bead count, because we want to make we want to do a chevron, and we want to make it as dramatic as possible so that you could see the V here. But you can make it more narrow. I have one that I made a little narrower. This is seven stitches in my ladder stitch. I also used a bigger size bead with this one, which I kind of like better. But and also, if you don't have this spacer bead here, you could use 3 seed beads. The 3 seed beads are about the height of one of these spacers. And with this bracelet, I didn't make my my chevron dramatic enough, so it's going to be a dramatic one with this project that we're making today. I just wanted to show you that there are variations. So let me continue on. So now what we're going to do is we're going to build brick stitch above ladder stitch. And how we build brick stitch is we're going to use the thread bridges that we created to make the ladder. If you look down from the top to the bottom of my ladder stitch, as a matter of fact, as long as you have an even number of ladder stitch, your tail thread is going to be pointing towards you, and your working thread is going to be pointing away from you if you have done it properly. And if you don't have an odd number of stitches, you're going to know it because your working thread is going to be exiting towards you. You want it to be exiting away from you. So to get back, we're going to build on this ladder stitch. I'm going to build brick stitch above the ladder stitch, and you can see that I have done that here in the earring. And I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. Brick stitch is naturally decreasing. Not to say that you can't increase brick stitch, but it is naturally decreasing, and you'll see how as we go on. I'm going to use my Silverline light gold color to do this stitch. So I'm going to string on 2 of these size 11 Silverline gold. I'm going to, and the reason I start off with 2 is because if you do 1, you're going to see your thread on the outside of that first bead. So we don't want to be seeing thread. We want to minimize the amount of thread that you can see when you do this type of project. So my thread is exiting this 11th ladder stitch, and in between each of these spacer beads, you see you have these thread bridges. Be right in between each of these spacers, you see that you have a thread bridge. In order for us to begin our brick stitch, I'm going to pass between the 2 thread bridge between the 10th and the 9th spacer bead. So I'm going to pass my thread here, and if that is confusing for you, the only thing I'm doing is I'm not going to pass my thread in this first thread bridge. I'm going to pass it in the second thread bridge. I'm going to pull my thread, and these beads, you really want them to sit up this way. So in order to make them sit up, and be careful when you do this, you're going to pass your needle and thread through the bottom of this second bead here. If you're not careful, sometimes you can pull your beads off by passing back up under the bridge accidentally. So what you want to do is you want to add those 2 beads, pull your needle under through, pass it back through that second bead, and you're going to pull your thread this way. This first bead on the end will be wonky, and it will not sit properly, and you have 2 choices. You can either go back through it, go back down this bead and pass back up this second bead again, and it looks like it, sit a little bit better. But you don't really have to do that, because when you come back the other way, your brick stitch is going to just make that one lay down. So I'm going to continue with my brick stitch. To string on 1 of my gold beads, and I'm going to pass my needle up under that next thread bridge right there. And pull the thread, pass my needle back up, and pull the thread. And just sits right there, nice and neat. String on another gold bead, and you're going to go right up under that next thread bridge right there. Pull your thread through and loop around here and pass the needle back up through that seed bead. And we're going to keep going. String on a gold bead, pass the needle up under that next thread bridge, and loop around and pass your needle right back up that same bead. You see how nice and neat they're sitting? I don't know what's going on here. It looks a little blurry. We have to fix that. Alright, we're going to continue. We're going to string on another gold bead and pass our thread up under that thread bridge there. Pull, loop back around, and pass the needle right up that seed bead. Continue, string on your gold bead and pass your needle through the next thread bridge. Loop back around and pass the needle back up. Pass the needle back up through. Okay, hello everybody, let's get this thing together. Pass it back up and pull your thread. String on the next gold bead. Pass your needle under the thread bridge. Pull, loop back around, pass your needle. Ooh, we're storming here. Having some blackouts. Pull your thread. String on the next gold bead. Pass the needle under the next thread bridge. Loop back around. Pass the needle back up through your gold seed bead. And pull your thread. And then the last one, string on a seed bead. Pass your needle under the thread bridge. Pull the thread. And loop back around and pass the needle back up that seed bead. And there you are. Now, when I say that brick stitch is naturally decreasing, you could see that by using the thread bridges between each of these spacer beads, I completed my row and I ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seed beads in my first brick stitch layer. Now I'm going to flip my work around here, and I'm going to start now at the end of the row that I just made. Here's my tail thread coming this way. That's how you know you completed the row. So we're going to start off by stringing on 2 of these gold seed beads, and I'm going to skip this first thread bridge here like I did with the spacers, and I'm going to come right over here to the second thread bridge, pass my needle under there, pull through, and then loop around and go pass the needle up into this seed bead and pull my thread. And when I do that, I want to pull going in this direction so that it can set up properly. I'm not going to do that double thing this time. I'm just going to continue on. I strung on a gold seed bead, and I'm going to go right here to the next thread bridge, right there to that next thread bridge. Pull my thread, loop back around, pass my needle up, and pull. String on a gold one, come to the next thread bridge, loop around, and pass the needle through that seed bead that you just added. Same thing, we're going to just keep going. Come to the next, well, today. The next thread bridge and loop around and pull the thread. You get the picture. We're going to continue this. We're going to continue doing this until you get to your natural progression of decreases. And I am going to pause you, and I'm going to let you keep on working through your thread bridges, and I'm going to let you catch up to me. And when we get together, when I come back on the next time, maybe the wind won't be blowing so forcefully, and the power won't shut off. Okay, when we get back together, you should be here where you have three of your seed beads. And when I come back to you, we're going to be coming out of this way, and we're going to add the wire guardian together. So I'm going to pause myself, and I will see you as soon as I get up to my third, the level that I have 3 seed beads on my brick stitch. I'm here with you now, and as promised, I have the 3 beads on the bottom, so that we can finish this piece off together. Now, let's string on our 2 size 11 silver line seed beads, and we're going to pass our needle through the thread bridge here, because there's only one thread bridge to use, and we're going to loop around and pass the needle up that seed bead like we've been doing. Now, this is as far as we're going to go with our brick stitch, because now we're going to complete the component. We'll flip this around this way. I'm going to string on my wire guardian. Those of you who have watched my videos know that I love these wire guardians. Wire guardian is a bead, and it has 2 holes. And it looks like a horseshoe. The first hole is here, and the second hole is around the groove and on the other side. So that's what I've done. I've strung my thread that way. I've passed it through both holes of the wire guardian, and just make sure that your thread is just sitting in the groove of the wire guardian. These have just like a nice channel for your thread to sit in there, and make sure that it's sitting there. But before I complete the passing of my thread here, I'm going to add my lobster clasp, and I am using a swivel bottom lobster clasp. That's another thing I'm in love with, and I get most of these items from Fire Mountain Gems. So I'm pulling my thread through the wire guardian and the lobster clasp, and I'm going to complete this pass of thread by coming back down into the second hole. We've got a nice shadow there. They're coming back down through that hole. I'm sorry, through this seed bead here, and I'm going to just pull my thread all the way down. And I don't want this thread twisted. I just want to make sure that you can see what I'm doing here, that I have this. There you go. the thread in my wire guardian and coming around this way. I'm just going to tighten that down. Once I tighten it down, I'm going to reinforce this connection. My shadow is doing the shadow thing here. Let me try to cover that up a little bit. Let's see. All right. It's a little better. All right. So I'm going to reinforce my connection, and by my thread is coming out of the seed bead that we just passed back through. I'm going to pass back up into this seed bead to the right of it, and through the first hole of the wire guardian, and through the lobster clasp. And I'm going to continue around the second hole of that wire guardian and down through that seed bead again and pull the thread, and just make sure that it sits right there in the groove of the wire guardian and around the lobster clasp, and everything is secure. And I'm going to do this one more time because this is our clasp connection, and we want to make sure that it is as sturdy as possible. So again, back through this seed bead, going back up, and the first hole of the wire guardian, and let me pull this down, and through the lobster clasp, and pull a thread. And then we're going to go around to the second hole of this lobster clasp and down that seed bead there on the left side, and we're going to pull and make sure that our thread sits in the groove of the wire guardian. This time I'm going to continue to pass my thread, my needle and thread, down through a few beads on this side here, and now just to weave this thread in to secure it. One thing that I have found by working on brick stitch, especially when you have like a transparent color like this gold one, and just brick stitch period, if you make knots in here, those knots are going to make your beads protrude, or you could see the knot. You could pull the knot up into some beads, but it's not going to be like, you know, pulling it through a different type of pattern. Like, you know, if you did this through right angle weave, you may be able to hide your knots, but with this brick stitch, you are not able to hide your knots in here. And that's another mistake that I made when I was making the earrings, and I'm happy to learn from that mistake, because if I'm teaching you something, I want you to get the best experience. If you have been really paying attention to what I've been doing as opposed to listening or multitasking, what I'm doing is I'm just weaving my threads into the beads. What I do is I come out of one bead here, coming out of this bead here, which is right next door to the bead here, and I'm just going to pass down into the bead that's next door to it. Usually if you make 2 or 3 turns with these, going through the weaving through this pattern, you will make a very secure hold, and you don't have to tie knots. So all I'm doing is I'm going back in the other direction to my left now. My needle and thread is coming out of this bead here, and I'm going right next door. I'm just going to pass down. And the beauty of doing is all of this bead weaving is hiding your thread, making sure that you can't see threads, following all of your thread paths, and making sure that things are arranged neatly. And I think that that is going to be good. I don't think this is going to go anywhere because this NanoFil is amazing, especially for this project. It is amazing. So I'm just going to pass the thread that way and get my nippers and cut this off here. And I'm going to thread my tail thread and just run it up and down these spacer beads here. Just the beads, just the spacers and not anything else, just to make sure that I weave them in, the thread in, so that we have a secure hold. Just those spacer beads, and I'm gonna nip off my thread right there. What you are going to want to do is make another one of these components, because this is going to be your end component. Oh, sorry about that. Your end component of your bracelet. You're going to need another component, this time with the jump ring. You're going to do it just like this, except for when you get ready to add your closure, you're just going to put on the jump ring, put the jump ring on the wire guardian instead of the lobster clasp. So when you get those two done, we are going to start. I'm going to show you how to measure, and we're going to go ahead and do our chevron pattern to get this thing going. See you in a minute. As you can see, I completed both my components, one end with the lobster clasp and the other end with a single jump ring. And I put the pieces on the bead board. I pinned them down because I want to make a 7-inch bracelet. So as you can see, I have measured out my 7 inches, and I pinned them down so that I could see exactly where I need to be. With measuring my complete length, now I just need to measure where or how long I need to make my chevron length. And according to my measurements here, I need to make my chevron length 4 3/4 inches of beads. 4 3/4 inches of beads, and I have already measured those out to know that I need 91 size 11 seed beads. I'm using these Miyuki ones, so I know that I need 91 to make the 4 3/4 inches. However, I'm going to be using one of my 2x4 millimeter spacer beads in the center, so I'm substituting the 91 beads for 88 because I had previously mentioned that the length of this spacer bead is the length of 3 of the seed beads, so I'm going to substitute that, and I'm going to use it right in the middle, and I'm going to need 11 of them because I'm going to that's going to be the center of the bracelet, just like with this bracelet here. These 3 black seed beads is the center, so that's how I'm going to use the spacer bead. All right, let's get started. I strung my needle with 3 yards of the NanoFil. I tied a knot here at the base of this silver line light gold bead and the spacer bead. I tied the knot and I pulled the knot through that spacer bead, and then I commenced, and well, I threaded on this progression of beads for the first end. 6 of my gold, and then I did a texture mix. I did the gunmetal and gold by alternating the gunmetal and the gold, gunmetal and the gold, gunmetal and the gold, and I just made a 6 bead texture mix. Then for my main color, I added 26 of the gunmetal. Then I did a second texture mix with my rainbow and gunmetal, and I did 6 of those. And then I used 3 of the rainbow seed beads. I added my spacer, and then I went in reverse order. I have 3 now of the rainbow. I have my texture mix with the rainbow and the gunmetal. I've got my 26 gunmetal beads here. I've got my texture mix with the gold and the gunmetal, and then I've got 6 of the gold. So that is our 88 beads plus our spacer bead. And the only thing I'm going to do now is grab the other end, my other component, and pass my needle up through the end spacer bead. And I'm only going to use the spacer beads to do this. And now I'm gonna pass my needle down through the next spacer bead. And pull the thread. I want these beads to not to have gaps, but I also don't want them to be pulled too tightly. Don't want to make them buckle. And of course I did a fill thing here. I have a knot. All right, here you are. There you are. Now that is our outside, and keep note, because this is symmetrical, what we do on this end is what we're going to do on the other end. And the only one that does not have a symmetrical partner is going to be the center spacer bead. The number 5 is going to be its own man, but the outsides are going to mirror one another. So now I'm going to string the next part of the chevron. To continue, I've already strung on the first part of this, the second line. So my count now is 9 of the gold, and I made a mixture, gunmetal and gold, gunmetal gold, gunmetal gold, and that's 6 of those. I have decreased the count of the gunmetal to 23. I added, I started off this side with 6, and because I added 3 to the second line, I decreased my main color count by 3. And then I did my mix again, my texture mix with the rainbow and the gunmetal, and then the rainbow, 3 of the rainbow, and my spacer bead. Once I get here, I'm going to ladder stitch my second spacer bead by going back up. The first spacer bead that I have, this is only because I don't want all of these beads loose, flying loose. It's really pretty, but I'm clumsy and I will inevitably knock them out somehow. So I passed my needle and thread going in the direction of the jump ring part of the clasp, and now I'm just going to, like we did when we made the component, pass the needle back through the second spacer bead and pull the thread. And you can reinforce that if you like. I'm not going to, I don't think I have to, but I just want to make sure that these are arranged properly. Come on. This is where you have to make sure that you pull tightly so that you don't see your threads here, and this will help to be able to see the chevron once you get all your beads added. So now, instead of making you watch me place the beads on the needle, I'm going to tell you what my count is. My count is the same as it is on this side, but backwards. You're going to start out with your 3 rainbows, then you're going to do your texture mix with the rainbow and the gunmetal, 23 gunmetal, the texture mix with the gold and the gunmetal, and the 9 gold. And let's see when I'm done with that. I completed stringing the other side of this line, and I'm going to pass my needle up this component. I'm sorry, I keep calling this a component, this spacer bead, and pull the thread. And I'm really glad you can't see this mess I'm making with thread over here. I'm getting it tangled everywhere. Oof. All right, here we are. Now, you get the picture. You pass to get into position to string the next line of the chevron. We're going to pass our needle through, down through this spacer bead, and pull the thread. Now, this time, I'm going to increase my number of gold beads at the top, and I'm going to, I started off with 6, then I have 9. Now I'm going to add 12. But when I add the 12 now, this number of my main color is going to decrease from 23 to 20, and that's the only difference that I'm going to make on this side. And I'll be with you until we get all these beads on there, and then I will show you how to make the ladder stitch here. So I added my 12 gold, my 6 bead texture mix, 20 of the main color, my 6 bead texture mix, and 3 of the rainbow color, and my spacer bead. once I do add my spacer bead, now we know we have to do our ladder stitch. So I'm going to pass my needle back up through the previous spacer bead and pull my thread. Okay, of course that's going to happen. Listen, don't be concerned if stuff like this happens, because it's going to. That's what we call Murphy's Law. Whatever can happen will happen. So it will happen. All right, and then I'm going to, once I get these arranged or in place, take this, my needle and thread, through back down through this most recent spacer and pull. I'm getting caught on everything over here. That's because I'm working with a 3-yard piece of NanoFil. Okay, and then we're going to pull things together, tighten them all up, minimize the appearance of thread here, and as you can see, we're getting it going. We got our chevron starting to form up here, and these components trying to come together, and it looks like my I've got a curve going on in the component, and that's why these beads looked a little bunched up. They're bunching up a little, but that's fine, because once you get them all on and you get them on your wrist, you're going to need that movement. You may not be able to you're not going to be able to see the bunching when you're wearing it, and also when we get done, we'll, you know, pull it out a little bit and make it a little less bunchy. So here we are again on the second side of the spacer, where the only thing we're going to do is mirror what we've done on this side. You mirror your beads, the 3 rainbow, your texture mix, your 20 main color, your texture mix, and then your gold, and then we'll add it down here on this side. I completed adding those beads, and I'm going to pass my needle through this 3rd spacer bead, just the spacer, and pull the thread and reposition by going into the next, this 4th spacer bead here, where our count is going to increase by 3 on the gold beads. So that means I'm going to add 15 of the gold, 15 gold, my texture mix, and that means 17 now of the main color and the texture mix and the 3 and the spacer. So I added these 15, 6, 17, 6, 3, and the spacer, and I'm going to pass my needle up through the previous spacer bead and pull the thread and pass the needle back down through this most recent spacer bead and pull my thread and repeat your reverse sequence. I added my reverse sequence. I'm going to pass my needle and thread up through the 4th spacer on this side, pull my thread, and reposition my needle so that we can add our center line of the chevron. Hope you guys are with me. Hope you have all of your beads in a row. Here we are. This is where we are right now. So we're about to add the center line of the chevron, which makes the point of the V. And with this, be patient with me. We're going to do 18 of the gold. Okay, 18 of the gold. Then we're going to do our mixture. We're going to do gunmetal, gold, gunmetal, gold, gunmetal, and gold. And we're going to do now the shortest part of the main color, which is 14. And then we're going to do our chevron mix. Rainbow, gunmetal, rainbow, gunmetal, rainbow, gunmetal, and then 3 of the rainbow. And our spacer. We pull these down. And of course I have a knot in my thread, of course, because only Phyllis can make knots, as Phyllis can. Alright, so I have, like I said here, my 18 gold mix, 14 main mix, 3 rainbow, and a spacer. And I'm going to pass my needle and thread back up through the previous spacer and pull the thread. Hopefully this time I won't get a knot. I don't know anyone who gets knots in their thread. Nobody, just me. And then pass your needle this way through the spacer bead. These spacers are really nice because they're like cubed rectangles, cubed rectangles. They're really nice. They sit side by side really nicely, and I really like that. So I've got my bunching going on as we expected, and then we're going to do our reverse sequence. Okay, we're going to do 3 of the rainbow. Then we're going to do our texture mix. 1 gunmetal, 1 rainbow, 1 gunmetal, 1 rainbow, 1 gunmetal, 1 rainbow. 6 of them. Then we're going to add 14 of this main color. We're going to pull them down so you can see where we are. We're going to do our texture mix with gold, gunmetal, gold, gunmetal, gold and gunmetal, 6 of them, and then 18 of the gold, which will make the center of the chevron. And then we'll pass our needle through the second part of the ladder stitch over here. So we're going right back up into that fifth. To this fifth the fifth in line. I don't know, I bumped my head. This is not the center. The center is number 6 here. Oh, I don't even know what I was talking about. So let's reposition our thread. Don't mind me, I'm just teaching a class. Oh my goodness. We're going into the center, which now this will make the longest, the center of our chevron. You see how it makes the nice V here. So in the center here, this is the longest part. So everything else, when you get to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, when you get to number 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, they are going to mirror what you did on this side. So number 7 is going to have the same count as number 5. Number 8 is going to have the same as number 4. 9 as 3, 10 as 2, and 11 as 1. This one, the center one, is the only one that's going to stand alone. And I'm going to do 21 of the gold. And this, the texture mix, 11. The texture mix, 3 and a spacer. And remember, when you do that, you come back up that way and back down through the spacer, and then the reverse sequence and back up and down. And you should be able to follow along with this. If you have any trouble, just back up a little bit and see where I went, and then you'll be able to see where I'm going. And then when I finish stringing all of mine, then we'll get back together and I'll show you how I'm going to tie off my threads. I have all of my beads strung on now, and I'm about to finish off this last line of the chevron. I'm passing my needle through this spacer bead, and then I'm going to go back through this spacer bead next to it and pull my thread. Now I have about 1 yard of thread left, so I'm not going to weave all of that in, but I just want you to know that I began doing the chevron process with 3 yards of thread. I would not change the amount of thread that I used, even though I have a yard left. I wouldn't change that amount because I want to be able to complete that portion of the bracelet with 1 thread. That was very important to me. I didn't want to add anything on because it just compromises the strength. And so I just wanted to get that on there. I want to reinforce this a little bit more. I'm going to go back up this spacer bead and back down the, well, for now, and just show you, you're going to have some bunching. And we already anticipated that. We've been talked about that a couple times throughout the video. Now don't be afraid of this. This is a wonderfully made piece of jewelry. And when you wonderfully make your piece of jewelry, some of you know what I am talking about when you are wonderfully made. Don't be afraid of it. Yes, it's delicate. Yes, it's dainty, but also it's a piece of work that you have put your time and your effort in. You have spent the time choosing your colors, getting your findings, doing all of these things, and then you can't be afraid then to play with your jewelry. So we talked about the bunching. The only thing I just did now was I picked up the bracelet by its components, the two end components, and I'm just stretching it a little bit. I'm stretching it because I don't want there to be that much bunching, and when I do that, you could see the dramatic chevron that we have made. It's a wonderful, wonderful eye catcher, and it matches these earrings quite lovely. The only thing is about the earrings, the only thing that I would do differently if I were to cut these apart and make them over, is I would use light color beading thread, because I don't like how I see the dark in the gold component. Some people may not see it, but I see it, and that's the thing that I would change. The earrings are really lovely, but the gold, the dark thread is what bothers me. So now we're going to just finish. After you look at it and admire your work, of course, you have to admire your work because you have to be proud of it. We're going to tie it off. So I have my thread exiting this spacer bead, and I'm going to I'm going to make a couple half hitch knots here. I'm going to pass my needle between the spacer bead and this bottom gold seed bead, and I'm going to pull up a loop with my thread. I'm just going to make sure that I have my thread where I need it in order to make the knot where I need it. So as you can see, I pulled here and my thread is coming between the spacer bead and that bottom gold seed bead. And what I did is I just pulled up a loop with my thread. It's almost like crocheting. You pull up a loop with your thread, and I'm going to pass my needle through this loop twice. Make a nice knot, and pull this thread and position this knot right here between that spacer bead and that gold seed bead. I'm going to try to hide this knot now down this next spacer bead if I possibly can. Just pull it down and pull on it and see if you can hide it. I don't see the knot here, and I'm really happy about that. So I'm going to pass my needle back up through this next spacer bead. And I'm just going to go back down to the next spacer bead. Just that spacer. And up the next spacer bead. So right now I am at the 5th spacer bead. I'm going to now make another knot. I'm going to bend this a little bit so that I can see where I'm going, and I'm going to wedge my needle in here and pass it under some threads around that particular seed bead. If you need to use a smaller needle to do that, you can. I'm using my my tulip needle, which is a lovely thing. So all I did was I pulled my thread, needle and thread, up under this bead here, and I caught some thread and I pulled up this small loop. And again, I'm going to pass this needle and thread through that loop twice. And I'm going to pull on that. You can see the knot there a little bit, but I'm about to try to hide that knot in this next spacer bead, which is the 6th middle one. Uh-oh, I didn't want to make a knot in there. I wanted to hide the knot in there. And it appears that that is not a good idea because I went too far over. I have to go back over, and I'm going to have to go back down into that 5th, to the, I'm sorry, yes, into this spacer bead here, because I want to hide the knot. There you go. The knot is safely hidden in there. So now I'm ready to just weave some of this thread into this brick stitch so that I can knot it off. So I'm going back up this next spacer bead, and I'm going to try to catch one of these size 11 seed beads as I do this. Oh, come on. There you are. So I caught one of these. Oh, come on, let's go. One of these seed beads within the brick stitch, and now I'm just going to weave the threads into these, a couple of these beads, so that I can not cut off the thread, because my knotting is done and this project is secure. And remember, when I weave, what we want to do is we want to follow previous thread paths. So my thread is coming out of this seed bead right here, and I just want to pass it down to the one into the seed bead next door, and make a little loop around, and go back into those beads again and go back down. And that will make it secure. Just want to do this again, stretch it out a little bit, and stretch my thread here, and take my nippers, and cut that right off. There you have it. My fringy chevron bracelet that matches my fringe earrings. Now, I'm not going to do a whole tutorial on these earrings, but I am going to tell you that you make the same exact component here, and you use your wire guardian, and you attach an ear hook, an ear wire to the top of it. And you have to change your thread. You cannot use you can't use a fire line or a NanoFil. You have to use like a nylon thread, because otherwise your earring will not flow. It will be stiff, and sometimes if there are kinks in the fire line, you'll see the kinks and you won't see the nice flow of the fringe. It won't dance for you, and that's what you want it to do. You want your fringe to dance. So, and you have to use some type of nylon thread. So I used my 1G to do it, to make the fringe, and the same principle applies. I did not make any knots when I did use this 1G. I weaved some 1G into my brick stitch, and then I came out at an end, and I did my chevron with 3 gold beads and then the mix, and then the main color and 3 of the next mix, and the rainbow and the spacer. And I did I used 3 seed beads on the bottom, and I just increased that. I did not change any of the counts except for my tops. So I used 3, 6, 9, 12, 18, and then the reverse to do the same thing. But I think I used 15 of the main color here before I did the mix. But it just makes a nice completed V with that, to make the chevron with the lovely texture. I really love it. But you have to use some type of nylon thread to do the fringe, otherwise it will not dance for you, and you want that fringe to dance. You don't want it to be stiff looking. So that's the way. If you have questions with regards to making the fringy earring, just ask me a question in the comments and I will get back to you. If you need further instruction, I might end up making a video or leaving you a link to someone else's video, because this has been done. I've just never seen a matching fringe bracelet to go with the earrings. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Have a great one and stay safe.